Let's look at 8 top tips of where to invest in 2024. So the first tip is don't get spooked out of a good position. This is the S&P 500 over the last 30 years. It's had times when it's done well, it's had times when it's done pretty badly, but all in all, I think you're better off holding on to a position in some of the best quality companies in the world rather than trying to guess what's going to happen over the next 12 months. This is the PE ratio of the S&P 500. And if you use this to guide you, you'd probably be in and out of the markets way too often, and you might miss out on some really good opportunities. And at the moment, the PE ratio is kind of really average, I would have said, although some people are trying to say it's actually quite high. But I think that markets are quite efficient, so you're probably best just sticking with the S&P 500 if that's where you've got your money, because American companies these days sell and manufacture globally. So really, the S&P is becoming more and more of a proxy for the global market. Tip number 2 is to find some great funds and stick with them. Have some robust selection criteria around the sort of companies you want included in your funds and how the fund manager goes about selecting those companies. So this is Royal London Global Equity Select, which has had a fabulous year, as has things like JP Morgan Global Growth and Income. When you understand a bit more about how they operate, you'll realize that these are pretty good funds. And again, if you own them, stick with them. So now you've got your core funds, and around that, you can have some satellite ideas. So a global tracker or the S&P 500 is a large cap growth. So to complement that, you might want something that's small cap, such as the WOSC, or maybe something that's minimum volatility, MINV, or value, IWFV. And what you can do is look at the correlation between your core fund and these satellite funds to maybe find the best ones that complement what's going on in the rest of your portfolio, such that when the global growth funds don't do so well, your satellite can pick up some of the slack. Tip number 4 is to be aware of mean reversion, which means that prices will revert to more of a longer term trend. So last year's losers can easily become this year's winners, particularly given that they're starting from low base. And something that possibly fits with that is healthcare, or in particular biotech, where people originally thought that drug discovery times would be shortened in a post-COVID world, but actually there's been very few biotechnology breakthroughs in 2023. So here's another example of mean reversion in action, which is the Magnificent Seven, companies like Google, Microsoft, Facebook, Apple, Tesla, Nvidia. Here's their share price declining in 2022 and then rising back to its past peak in 2023. So looking forwards, I'm not sure what the outlook is for the Magnificent Seven. Probably slow growth in line with what you'd normally expect for equities. Tip number 5 is to wait for signs of recovery if you're looking for good value, because prices can fall a lot more than you think. And here is China as an example. And over 3 years, there's been a steady decline, although a bit of a recovery in late 2022. But if you tried to catch that, you would have just had prices carry on slipping away from you. So still be very careful around catching the falling knife. Tip number 6 is that markets are efficient, and that means that bargains will be very hard to find. This is because people with more money and more computing power than you have already placed their bets. So by the time you come along and analyze something, people like Bill Ackman or whoever have already analyzed the market in quite some depth and either took a position or passed on it. Now, one possible exception is what's called frontier markets, and this fund is a frontier market fund. It's Red Wheel Next Generation Emerging Markets. So it's all kinds of things like Kazakhstan and Vietnam. Probably in isolation, the companies are quite risky, but if you put a lot of high risk assets together and some of them do well, as Scottish Mortgage are advocating, then hopefully you do get maybe a few winners that more than compensate for a lot of duds. Performance has been quite interesting in this fund. You do need to do a lot more research if it's of an interest to you, but I do feel that this is potentially an overlooked area because a lot of fund managers just don't have brokerage accounts in a country like Uruguay, so they could never buy Mercado Libre until it listed on the Nasdaq. And if you could get in early and buy some things that other people are just unable to purchase, no matter how much they like them, then you could be on to a winner. Tip number 7 is that dividends help if you need to be patient. So value investing has been unpopular for a long time because often the underlying earnings of the value companies aren't really growing over time. They're often in a long-term structural decline. But if you can get a 4 or 5% dividend yield from a value fund, then at least you're getting some compensation in line with a risk-free rate of return while you wait for the share prices to recover. So this is Van Eck Developed Markets Dividend Yield Leaders, which has a yield of around 4%. So it'd be interesting to see how this one performs going forwards. Hope you've enjoyed the video. Let me know your comments. Also check out my website, ianshadrack.com. And next up, I recommend you watch this video.